So you've probably seen this before. This here is an IKEA RÅSKOG, I think is the way they pronounce it. It's just a 3-tiered trolley. It's super strong and it's super cheap. And this one we bought for our house and it found its way out here into the shed. Nothing against it, but we just didn't really have a use for it inside. And so I've actually been loving it. It's a super useful but very minimalist piece of kind of furniture for your garage. I like to put kind of things like my glues and finishes and other things in here and then just pull this trolley over when I'm getting to that stage and then not have to like have all these things strewn across my work surface, and I can focus on just gluing and getting the work done. It also comes with one of these. I don't know if you buy them separately or we just did, but this here is just a little table that you can add to any of these surfaces, which I find super useful because it is a great way to not only store things underneath, but also have like a flat working surface, particularly if you're using this as a trolley aid kind of at your hip whenever you're working. So I looked at the design of this one, wasn't really a fan of the overall design here. I figured to myself, you know what? We can make one of these. I've got a panel that was kind of left over from when I did the Pacific folding bar build, a lot of recycled timber. So I'm thinking I'm going to use one of those. I think a pattern bit, a jigsaw will be a really easy way to cut this out. And then if I get a rabbiting bit, or I might use the table saw, I don't know, we'll figure that out, to cut this section here and make one of these for either the top, or if I'm not kind of going to use this one anymore, then it'll take over as looking nice and also not being made of bamboo, which I'm not really a fan of the look of. So let's go. So just to start off with, I will use the original piece as a rough guide to give me the rough shape, dimensions and the curves of those corners. The actual design of it was completely fine. I really just didn't like the timber. So I'll start by using, I'd already glued this up, I had put it aside. This is just a piece that was just not used when I was making Pacific folding bar, so it still has those tongue and groove edges on it, so I had to just quickly rip those off. And while I was doing that, I just figured I would rip this piece to a rough size as well. I'll use a jigsaw to cut out the kind of rough curves of both those handle ends and then also cut the corners. Eventually we'll be using a pattern bit to actually get these to the precise dimensions of the original piece, but for now the jigsaw does a perfectly fine job of taking a lot of that material away. So as I was talking about, we got the pattern bit, we got a rabbiting bit, and I'll also use a chamfer bit on this piece. So starting off with that pattern bit, I learned a big lesson with this one, particularly around these palm routers. So the pattern bit for these palm routers is not deep enough to go in one pass. So I spent quite a long time making sure I run over everything with 2 passes. And this then eventually got it to the dimensions. And I was lucky to not have too much tear out on those corners as well, which is probably something that I would say was a big risk when just running a route around those edges, but we got there in the end. So once the pattern bit has done its job, the next step is going to be running a rabbet around the full width of this piece. This will give a small detent and allow that piece to sit kind of, whilst not being bolted or locked in any way, shape or form, somewhat secure in those trays. And this just allows you to put objects on the top of that tray without feeling like if you knock it, the piece of timber is going to fly off and send everything everywhere. I'll now put it for a couple of passes through the DeWalt 735. I love this planer. I've only had it for a very short amount of time, but the amount of time it took me to clean these boards when I was making the Pacific folding bar, this has just exponentially cut down on that time. I really wish I had it for that project. Next, I'll just chuck up a 45-degree chamfer bit. I wanted to just soften the edges, and in this case I've gone with that 45-degree. Sometimes I could use a round over, but in this case, personal preference, went with the 45. I am keen to go from the Ryobi palm router to something different. So if you've got any good recommendations, please put them in the comments, because I'm not a real big fan of how long it takes me to change bits. I've heard other ones can be much better. And while we're talking about that, let's just have a look at my arm, because I didn't know where to point the camera. So we'll grab the sander and we'll just give it the normal pass of a kind of a rough grit, 80 grit, then 120 grit, and then 240 grit. Another thing I think I'll be looking for is a different sandpaper. I'm currently using the Diablo sandpaper. It's much better, definitely, from a not gumming up perspective, but the dust collection, as you can see, is not working as efficiently as it could. Sometimes I'll punch holes in it, but in this case I didn't, and as you can see, there's still heaps and heaps of sand all over that. So before we finally hit it with the kind of last sand, I decided to raise the grain. So I just wet rag over the top of this, and usually you do that so then you can you know, raise the grain, get a nicer finish on it. But in this instance, I just wanted to see what it was going to look like, and throwing some cabinet maker's wax on it, you can see those colors come out amazingly. I use cabinet maker's wax in this instance because this is just typically what I just put on most of my projects. It is paste wax. It is quite good for keeping some of the other surfaces slippery, and it does help to try and prevent glue and other things from sticking to this surface. But another reason I use it is just because it's quite easy to apply. It doesn't require too much energy or effort to upkeep. So I've gone with it on this instance, and as you can see, it's looking great. So there it is. This is probably one of the kind of most elegant pieces that I think I've made so quickly. I really like the color from these Jarrah floorboards. I tell you what, so go and watch the other video that I made on the Pacific folding bar if you want to see where these came from. But they are recycled floorboards. They're all tongue and groove. And the fact that they're coming out with colors like this is absolutely amazing, given that they were probably going to either turn into firewood or be used somewhere, probably not on display like this. So I'm super glad that they show up this well. And it's just so simple for a little trolley like this to just look that much nicer. I suppose you can see that there. Instead of that other piece that did very much look like an offcut, this is looking a bit more like something that I would be willing to stare at all day. So we'll definitely make small things like this again. Thanks for watching, and I will see you on the next one. Cheers.